A true story from Mississippi. My grandkids mocked my old phone, so I sold my tech stocks and left a surprise in my will. They laughed at my phone. They'll cry at the reading. Grandma's using an X-ray phone. My grandson yelled it loud enough for everyone to hear. He pointed and laughed. Around him, laughter bubbled up, sharp and raw. I paused, chest tightening. I heard footsteps, my daughter-in-law stepping closer. She looked at my phone, frowned like it was a relic dredged from an archaeological site, then glared at me. Her voice was soft, but her words stung. Mother, at least use a decent phone so we're not embarrassed by you. It was a warm spring afternoon in Mississippi, the kind of day that feels like a long, slow sigh of sun through magnolia blossoms. My daughters-in-law draped pastel balloons across the pergola and strung solar lanterns among the azaleas. Soft gospel music floated across the yard. It was my 83rd birthday, a full circle, surrounded by family. Or so I thought. I took a deep breath, as if steadying myself for a speech at an old school reunion. I reached into my handbag and pulled out my flip phone, the same one I had bought 20 years ago, the one I used to call my husband during his nighttime heart spasms and to remind the doctor to check his blood pressure. I turned the camera toward my 2-year-old granddaughter as she toddled toward me with a plate of cupcakes. The phone screen flickered to life, a comforting hum like an old friend. Then I heard it. "Grandma's using an X-ray phone." My grandson yelled it loud enough for everyone to hear. He pointed and laughed. Around him, laughter bubbled up, sharp and raw. I paused, chest tightening. I heard footsteps, my daughter-in-law stepping closer. She looked at my phone, frowned like it was a relic dredged from an archaeological site, then glared at me. Her voice was soft, but her words stung. "Mother, at least use a decent phone so we're not embarrassed by you." For a heartbeat, the world was still. The gospel music dimmed. The balloons dropped like silent witnesses. My son stood there, silent, eyes glazed. I recognized the look. It was the same look I had given my father the day I decided to attend college instead of marrying at 18. Shock, disappointment, mild disgust. I set the phone down gently next to my purse and watched the screen go dark. My arms felt suddenly empty, as though I had put down something more than plastic and circuitry. In that silence, memories returned. The night I held that phone to my ear at 2 a.m, listening for the ambulance's arrival. The day I got the first text message from a friend who had moved away. The day I learned to FaceTime my only daughter-in-law who lived 2 states away. That little flip phone had been a lifeline, not a liability. The hush at the party felt heavier than the midday sun. I could feel every pair of eyes on me. Awkward, uncertain, complicit. I sat at the edge of the patio bench where we had laid the cake. The cupcakes waited, half frosted, their innocence mocking me. Nobody spoke. My granddaughter, sensing the shift, stepped away, confusion in her bright eyes. My grandson still held the phone, a ridiculously oversized toy in his hand. I rose slowly. Not angrily, not tearfully, just steady. The weight of years and memories pressed into my spine and gave me rigid strength. I stepped away from the table, past the silent trays of watermelon slices and fried chicken. I walked through the arch of blooming jasmine, past the edge of the lawn, where the sprinkler mist shimmered in the sun. I kept my head upright, though tears threatened to fall behind my eyelids. I took a few more steps, felt the warm earth under my wedge sandals, and let my breath come in slow, measured waves. I reached the back gate, heard the world dim to a hum again. I opened the latch and went through it. The gate clicked softly behind me, sealing me away from the party, but not from my own dignity. Outside, a breeze lifted stray petals from the garden, and I traced my hand across the white picket fence like reaching for a memory that still belonged to me. I paused and looked back at the house. Its red brick, the colorful balloons, the group clustered around, waiting for me to return. But I would not return tonight. I walked down the drive, leaving footprints in the soft soil, careful not to look back. The air smelled of honeysuckle and summer promise. I breathed it in and let it remind me of who I had once been. A nurse, a wife, a mother, a woman who held this family together on days when the world threatened to tear them apart. I didn't stop until I reached the little bench beneath the oak tree at the edge of the property, a bench my husband and I had bought after we retired. I sat there, closing my eyes. I pictured my husband beside me, reaching for my hand, offering quiet comfort. Tears leaked from the corners of my eyes, but I didn't wipe them. They were not tears of defeat. They were quiet tears of clarity. I knew what I would do next. I would honor that flip phone. I would preserve its memory, and I would decide what mattered most in a legacy. But tonight, I would sit here and let the breeze carry the laughter away. I would wait until tomorrow, and when I left this bench, I would not be the embarrassed wife at her 83rd birthday. I would be the woman who chose self-respect over tradition. I sat with the breeze, with the fading light, with my own dignity, and I let it settle in my heart like the petals at my feet, quiet, persistent, unyielding. It was late one summer evening, years ago, when Robert surprised me with that flip phone. We had just celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary in the hospital lounge, Robert recovering from yet another episode of chest pain. The doctor explained that a mobile phone could mean the difference between life and death. We would not get rid of that phone. He bought it along with a new plan, because he said I deserved ease, not waiting in hallways anymore. That July night, he placed 2 tiny batteries in the flip phone in my palm. I could still feel the weight of it, solid and warm. He whispered, "Now you can reach me, even when I'm not by your side." In the years that followed, that phone became our lifeline. When his heart would thud like a runaway train, I'd dial the clinic so fast my fingers trembled. They would say, "Stay calm, Mrs. Johnson. Paramedics are 2 blocks away." Then I would cradle him until help arrived. One afternoon, I was at the market 3 miles away when I got the call. Something was wrong. I dropped my purse, stood frozen by the produce stand. My flip phone rang with my daughter-in-law's number, but I clicked instead on the clinic. "It's Mrs. Johnson," I said, urgency cracking my voice. It happened again. Within 20 minutes, I was back by his bedside, whispering old songs to calm him. That phone wasn't just a gadget. It became a guardian angel at my hip, a promise that I was never truly alone. During storms, it glowed through the dark. When our power cut out, its tiny light was a beacon. My children complained about reception or battery life, but I treasured it. After Robert passed 5 years ago, I kept using the phone out of habit, out of memory. Each ring echoed reminders of our life together. I called his doctors even after he was gone. I needed that voice, that reassurance. I believed some part of him lived in every dial tone. Over the years, the phone naturally aged. Scratches along the plastic, the battery not holding full charge, the screen dimming. When larger phones came with $1,000 price tags, I saw them as more vanity than necessity. Besides, what could you do with a fancy phone that I couldn't do with mine? Call someone in need, reach for help, send a quick text. I tucked it away in my dresser drawer for safekeeping, next to his old watch, and it became part of the furniture of my heart. Every now and then I'd open the drawer and look at it, remembering the day he handed it to me, how his familiar scent had lingered on it, how his steady hand had folded it shut. The flip phone taught me patience, simplicity, the prioritizing of what matters, connection when it's needed most, not endless scrolling. That prized object, dismissed by my grandchildren, bore witness to our shared mornings, coffee cups at dawn, the rustle of newspaper, my hand brushing his. It helped me call the school to ask about their exams, call my friends when grief struck too deep, call the plumber when pipes burst at midnight. It held my world in its small compass. It wasn't just reliable, it was sacred to me, a testament to a life built on little, consistent care. When my grandchildren laughed at it at my birthday party, it felt like they weren't just mocking the device, but mocking every step I took to preserve love, health, life. That phone held the first heartbeat monitor, the last doctor's appointment, the silent tears we shared. They laughed at it like it was a joke. Now, I walked to the hall closet and opened the top drawer where I stored that phone. It sat in the velvet-lined box I had made for it, a relic in soft darkness. My hands brushed the smooth plastic. I lifted the handset, flipping it open. The screen glowed dimly, old battery still alive after dozens of years. I drew a breath, feeling tears gather. "You called us back then," I whispered. "You never left." My voice did not shake. My heart ached, but my spirit felt fortified. This was the moment I knew the true value of memory. This was an anchor for my legacy. This is an emblem of what I refuse to let be silenced. I closed the box and slid it into my coat pocket. It was tiny in my hand, but colossal in purpose. For the first time since the party, I felt resolution bloom in my chest. My love, my past, and my future were interwoven with that simple device, and no amount of mocking laughter could erase it. That phone didn't just hold calls. It held trust, it held us, and it would speak volumes long after we were both gone. That flip phone was never obsolete, it was timeless, and so was the love it carried. I spent the morning after my birthday in my study, surrounded by papers and old binders. I first pulled out the monthly statements from Vanguard and Fidelity, then spread them across the desk. The charts showed steady climbs. Amazon shares bought in 2001, Apple shares purchased in 2003. They had grown and multiplied into an amount I had never dared imagine when I tucked dollars into retirement accounts for rainy days. My heart pounded when I saw the total. More than $2 million in tech stock I hadn't touched in years. That afternoon, I telephoned my broker Jenna, a kind voice I had heard whenever I wondered what the market was doing. She answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Johnson, good afternoon." "Jenna, I'd like to discuss selling all my Amazon and Apple shares," I said quietly. She paused. "That's a very large liquidation. May I ask why?" I didn't hesitate. "My grandchildren made fun of my flip phone. I need that money directed elsewhere." There was that pause again. "I can process the sell order, but this will take time, and the withdrawal penalties." "I understand. Do it." Then I hung up and typed Elder Dignity Foundation into a search. I found a non-profit incubation service and began drafting articles of incorporation. My plan: create a foundation to support elderly people who live alone, struggling to stay connected and engaged. I envisioned workshops, computer classes, phone discounts, companionship volunteers. Next, I called my lawyer, Thomas Reed, who'd helped me with real estate transactions years ago. His voicemail was full, and he returned my call later that day. When I explained, he asked, "Are you sure? That's generous." I shook my head even though he could not see me. "Not generous. Necessary. Anyone who mucked my phone will not benefit. Everything goes to the foundation. Clear?" He made notes. "Understood. We'll draft your new will, set up the foundation, and ensure your estate funds it entirely. We'll need to establish a board and file paperwork with the state." I felt something lift. Purpose. I spent the evening organizing binders for the foundation. Mission statement, action plan, board structure. I included a section specifying that any beneficiary who had mocked, teased, or ridiculed me after my 75th birthday would be explicitly excluded from inheritance. In the next days, the broker contacted me. Liquidation of Amazon and Apple shares completed. $2 million transferred to the foundation's startup account. My pulse hummed with the knowledge that this money would build something lasting, something real. Before signing the documents, I sat in my living room and held the flip phone. I whispered, "You always rang when it mattered. Now you'll teach them why it mattered." I sat at my desk, pen in hand. The papers lay before me. Articles of incorporation, foundation bylaws, board of directors list, new will and testament. I signed each page with my full name, my pen moving steadily as I heard the faint ring of the flip phone echo in my memory, like a bell of resolve. That night, I placed all signed documents into a binder marked Legacy. I felt calm, stronger than I had in years. This was how you turn heartache into action. This was how you let memory guide your hand, and this was how you ensure that respect, so carelessly thrown, becomes the bedrock for change. I shelved the binder, then closed my drawer and quietly said to the phone, "Keep ringing. Now for everyone who needs to be heard." Tomorrow I would prepare the reading of the will, knowing full well what faces would pale when they discovered their omission. But tonight, I slept rooted in clarity and lifted by conviction. I signed the final document late at night, the contract confirming the sale of my tech stocks into the foundation account. The echo of that pen stroke carried more weight than any conversation, more impact than any birthday gathering. I was no longer just Robert's widow or someone's grandmother. I was the architect of a legacy built on purpose, not indifference. I heard the phone ring late the next morning, an uncommon hour for my son Daniel to call. When I answered, his voice trembled with anger and confusion. "Mother? What did you do with my inheritance?" he demanded. I plan to use those Amazon and Apple shares as collateral for our family investment fund. You sold them all? I remained calm. Daniel, I did. He gasped. Sold them? Why? You know how important that fund is to us. I pressed my lips together, measured. Because you and your siblings treated my phone, and me, as a joke. He paused, catching his breath. Mother, that was meant as a joke. It was harmless. I said nothing, and he slashed a final apology before hanging up. That evening, they arrived at my front door, Daniel at the lead, Rachel, my daughter-in-law, beside him, their 2 children drifting behind. Rachel, makeup smudged, eyes red. Daniel looked exhausted, shoulders bowed. He marched in without waiting for an invitation. Mother, we need to talk. I led them to the dining table, set the places for 4, and only 4, as a quiet choice. As they took seats, I placed 2 photocopies in front of Daniel and Rachel. One was the broker's confirmation of the stock sale. The other was the new will. Rachel gasped. She drew in a sharp breath. Mom, what's this? I tilted my head, voice quiet. This shows everything is sold. And here, in the will, your names are removed. Daniel's face reddened as he scanned the pages. Removed? But I'm your son. This is impossible. Rachel trembled. We loved you. We respect you. We never meant to hurt your feelings. I looked at her directly. Didn't mean to hurt my feelings. Doesn't undo what you said, she frowned. Please, we were only teasing. Nobody gets hurt by a joke, I sighed. Not every joke lands harmlessly, and mocking my phone was mocking me. They both said nothing. The air was thick. That moment was when I made my decision fully realized. I picked up the will to the paragraph with the clause. I read slowly, even louder than I needed. Anyone who publicly mocked, ridiculed, or derided my person or belongings after my 75th birthday shall be explicitly excluded from any inheritance, estate, or benefit associated with me. Daniel's jaw dropped, his eyes filled with tears of shock and shame. Rachel reached across the table. Mother, please, we can change this. We can fix it. I pressed my fingertips together, staying calm, unwavering. It is done. The will is valid. Everything has been transferred. The stocks are gone. You have nothing. My words were soft, but they hit like lead. Aren't we family? Daniel whispered. I looked at him. Family doesn't mean entitlement. It means love, respect, responsibility. There was a heavy silence. Their shoulders sagged as if the ground had dropped from beneath them. I let them sit with it for a moment. No drama, just truth hanging between us. I stood and gathered the documents into a neat bundle. I tucked them under my arm. I hope someday you realize why this matters. Goodbye. I walked out of the room, away from sorrow and shattered expectations, leaving them with the evidence of their own cruelty. They called it humor. I called it the breaking point. Tonight was the night they discovered their inheritance was never a promise. It was trust, and they broke it. There is purpose and clarity, and now the foundation I formed stands not just on money, but on boundaries. The break in our family is real, but I have regained my voice, and that is worth more than stock. I answered the door to find Rachel standing on the porch, mascara streaked beneath her eyes and her expression raw with regret. Daniel stood just behind her, shoulders slumped, uncertainty heavy in his posture. Their 2 children hovered on either side. Rachel's voice broke as she stepped forward. Mother, please, she began, tears trembling in her throat. I'm sorry, we were cruel. Please tell me you're not hurt. I mean, aren't you upset? I didn't speak at first. I shook my head slowly, my silence louder than any words. Then I reached into my purse and withdrew my flip phone. I tapped through to show them their own group messages, each cruel joke, mocking emoji, disdainful comment. There it was on the screen. She's a relic. Time machine grandma. Stone Age phone. They read in horror. Rachel gasped. Daniel's mouth fell open. Their children glanced at each other, suddenly aware. I carry these, I said quietly, holding the phone between them. Not as evidence, but as truth. Rachel dropped her gaze. I didn't know you saw. Daniel crouched, head bowed. One child, a girl, started to cry. It was quiet, real. I folded the phone and looked at them. It was never about the money, I began. It was about respect. They looked at each other, unsure. I continued. Love is not declared in words when everything else is already taken. You said you were sorry, but your words now are small too late. Tears coursed down Rachel's cheeks. She reached out as if to touch my hand, but stopped. Daniel rose and stepped forward to beg. He dropped to his knees at my feet. Mom, I'm sorry. I really am. We'll do anything to fix this. Rachel sank to her knees beside him, tears slipping as she grabbed my hand. Mother, forgive us. I'll say it any way you want. Just tell us what to do. Their daughter held onto my skirt, whimpering quietly. Their son repeated, "We love you." I closed my eyes, felt his grip, heard their sobs. My heart didn't break. It hardened with resolve. I nudged the phone into my purse. You can say that again tomorrow, I said softly. But the decision has been made. Daniel's face twisted in anguish. Please, can't you let us fix it? Keep our names in the trust? We need it. I shook my head. No. The trust exists for people who need it, people like Esther, like Miriam, like Florence. I named women I knew, widows who never found someone to laugh with, who died in homes, alone, people who never had family to mock their phone, who never had a granddaughter to greet them. Rachel's wail turned ragged. But we're family, and yet you never treated me like one, I replied firmly. Not when you hugged me after calling me old-fashioned. Not when you snapped pictures and shared jokes. Not when you tried to protect your own shame at my expense. Daniel spread his arms, tears falling. I just want my mother back. I closed my eyes. I've never left. You left me. You left my dignity outside this house the moment you laughed in my face. They fell silent. I knelt briefly, touched their shoulders, tears falling of my own. I laid a hand on each of them, something like forgiveness, but not redemption. Then I stood. I took Rachel's trembling hands and said firmly, I love you, but I cannot give what is not earned. I am final on this. They stayed on their knees. I walked past them to the kitchen counter and picked up a pen. I signed the final page in the binder, confirming their names removed from the trust. I placed the pen down slowly, deliberately. When I'm gone, I said without turning back, this is how it will read. Your names are absent. It is done. I opened the door and walked out, each step measured. Behind me, I heard Daniel's choked sobs, and Rachel's pleas call out, half-formed and broken. I didn't look back. Outside, the wind was still. It felt empty, but it felt right. I closed the door quietly behind me and sat alone on the porch, chided by the moonlight. The quiet hummed of solitude, hopeful and proud. I held the flip phone in my lap and ran my thumb across the faded keys. It didn't need replacement, and neither did I. In its silence, so much remained, and in their absence from that trust, so too remained who I had become. Tonight, I found strength in solitude, a happiness that did not come from forgiveness, but from being whole on my own terms. This is the happiness of someone who walks away from a family that abandoned her, but does not walk away from herself. I moved into a modest riverside cottage a few miles down the gravel road from my old home, the one I'd left behind with the dignity intact. The cottage sat under an ancient oak whose roots curled toward the river Mississippi as if it were reaching for something deeper, something meaningful. I spent my first weeks clearing out weeds, planting lavender and daisies, and painting shutters to match the sky. My heart hummed with purpose again as I watched the space transform into something alive. Inside, I arranged the walls with memories, photographs of the women I hoped to serve, quotes about dignity and resilience, and tools for connection, board games, books, tea sets. But the centerpiece of the room was a small glass case on a pedestal, gesturing reverently to the olive-green flip phone nestled inside, above which I placed a plaque etched with gentle letters, "Memory lives here." It was a reminder not of mockery, but of what had kept me safe and what had grown as a result. A few weeks later, on a bright Saturday morning in late spring, we held the opening ceremony for the Elder Dignity Foundation. A dozen women gathered in folding chairs arranged in a semicircle facing the cottage porch. Their faces were lined but curious, like dunes undisturbed for too long. Representatives from the local Aging Services Coalition, 2 members of the county commission, and a reporter from the Mississippi Gazette stood nearby, cameras and smiles at the ready. I emerged onto the porch in a simple linen dress, the morning breeze playing through my silver hair. I carried a pair of scissors with a glittering ribbon draped across them, red, white, and blue, like the small flag fluttering in the breeze. I called it to order. Welcome, friends. This space is for those of us who have been forgotten, for those whose stories have gone unheard. Here, everyone matters. A hush settled as I touched the ribbon and cut. The collective cheer felt like the breeze itself, soft and warm. We moved inside for tea, homemade biscuits and peppermint spritzers. I led a quick tour. The reading nook where we could exchange books, the puzzle table, the fabric corner lined with yarn and needles. Each station had a purpose: to reconnect, to find laughter, to sit with someone on a difficult day. At exactly noon, I led them to the center of the room, where the glass case stood. I began, quiet but clear. This flip phone kept me alive when I needed it. It reminds me that memory matters. I placed it here because no one should forget how vital connection can be, even when it comes in small packages. As I pressed play on a small audio device next to the case, the room filled with the faint ringtone. It was the old melody I had chosen, something soft, nostalgic. I watched the women turn to the phone, their hands barely brushing the glass. And then I saw her, an older woman named Rosemary, eyes misting. She stepped forward, touched the glass as if trying to touch memory itself. She turned to me and whispered, "I've been alone since my husband died. Nobody's invited me to sit or share a cookie. You did that today." My throat tightened as I guided her into my arms. "You're here. You're welcome. You belong." That moment rippled across the foundation. Little baskets of knitted scarves appeared on the welcome table, each a gift from someone who had begun to feel again. Workshop sign-ups appeared, pens and paper for journaling, board games afternoons, even a gardening club to plant vegetables beside the river. Weeks later, with the story having spread through local newspapers and sympathetic writers, the Mississippi Gazette published an article under the headline, "Widow Turns Tech Wealth into Haven for Isolated Seniors." The article told of me selling my tech stocks and founding a space for mental health, mentorship, and community. It highlighted "Memory Lives Here," the flip phone exhibit, and a quote from Rosemary, "I've never felt so seen in my 83 years." We had a small gala fundraiser a month later. I stood on the porch as community members walked in, teachers, nurses, veterans, some of the very people who had mocked my phone years ago. But today they came with casseroles, blankets, and donations. It felt like a homecoming. That afternoon, a woman in a wheelchair rolled up. She was nearly 90, her hands worn but her eyes alive. She asked to hold my hand. I helped her stand, and together we walked to the phone exhibit. She paused, looked me in the eye, and said, "You have given me a reason to wake with hope again." In that moment, I felt something swell, something more than quiet pride. It was the validation of every choice I had made. The stock sale, the foundation, the invitation to be seen and to listen, it all made sense. I walked again behind the phone case. I ran my finger along the polished wood stand, feeling gratitude surge through my veins. I whispered, "Memory lives here." And I believed it, not just for me, but for all of us gathered in that room. On the porch, I looked out at the maples and the river beyond. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves. I thought of my grandchildren, of the laughter I had left behind, and I thought, they laughed at my flip phone, but I built something that cannot be mocked, something that stitches hearts back together. That day marked the true rebirth of my legacy. It began with a phone, but it continues with hearts being heard, hands being held, and souls being given space to exist, no matter how old, no matter how much people try to dismiss us. I turned to Rosemary, to the line of women filing in, each clutching a new companion's scarf or a memory-filled smile. I raised my teacup, to life, to dignity, to memory. They raised theirs too. The river glimmered beside us, and that flip phone, encased forever in glass, stood quiet guard, no longer a relic, but a beacon of belonging. I began receiving letters soon after Elder Dignity Foundation had its first few events. They arrived in plain envelopes, some with pressed flowers, some handwritten on stationery rescued from decades-old desks. Each letter felt like a bridge from loneliness into companionship. One came from a woman named Clara. "Dear Mrs. Johnson, I've sat with my cat and tea each evening since I first walked through your door. I am 89 and live alone now that my husband is gone. I have no children to come home to, and yet, because of you, I am home. Thank you for understanding what loneliness feels like and for caring enough to act on it. Clara. Tears blurred my vision as I folded that letter and slipped it into a leather-bound journal I kept on my desk. The next week, 2 more arrived, one from a shy man named Earl, who wrote about how subscribing to the weekly newsletter kept him connected. Another from a grandmother in Arkansas who said she passed the journal around at bingo nights, sharing stories and comfort. Some of these letters made it into the local paper. Facebook feeds and online local news shared images of senior women working on puzzles, playing checkers, and holding workshops on gardening. One post made it to several thousand likes, a snapshot of me and Rosemary hugging beside the flip phone exhibit. The caption read, "Mississippi Grandma turns tech wealth into a sanctuary for the elderly." Not long after that, I received an invitation to speak at the Regional Conference on Aging, held in Biloxi. I stood before a packed auditorium. Therapists, caretakers, community leaders, surrounded by the buzz of fluorescent lights and a podium bearing my name. "I was once the punchline of my own birthday party," I said into the microphone. They mocked my flip phone. They laughed when I held onto a memory. But what I learned is this: connection is not measured in megapixels or battery life. Connection is measured in presence, in recognition, in the courage to show up. There were nods, a few tears in the front row. Afterwards, I received notes and applause, and an offer to bring Elder Dignity Foundation programs to other towns. My phone rang on broken earbuds, and on upgraded smartphones alike, requesting training, guidance, and partnerships. Back at the foundation, I kept track of our progress. The binder on my desk listed donors, neighbors who gave their time, local businesses sponsoring classes, and a small grant from the Department on Aging. We had enough to cover rent, utilities, and to pay part-time facilitators. We issued 10 scholarships that first year to women who needed transportation or supplies. I had a folder labeled Statistics, where I recorded attendance numbers: 45 unique participants in the first quarter, 10 made new friendships, 6 reported improved mood, and even a couple spoke of reconnecting with estranged family members after finding purpose again. These were my trophies, quiet but real. I noticed that my grandchildren watched us closely. They followed the live streams, capturing women knitting and telling stories. They watched as I spoke notes with passion into the camera. Some of my daughter-in-law's friends left comments. "This woman is an inspiration." Enough of them that the notifications kept me up at night, though I didn't respond to any. One afternoon, I opened a package that made me smile, a framed photograph from the office. It showed the flip phone inside its glass case, with a whiteboard behind it reading, "Your name's unlinked, forever." I kept it in my office as a reminder: the cost of dignity, the price of mockery. That phrase had appeared in news captions, in comments. My grandchildren must have seen it. It was a phrase that hurt them, or at least unnerved them, and in that reaction lay a faint resurrection of regret. In the evenings, I would sit by my desk and hold hands across the years with people I had never met, but who felt like family. I would sip mint tea, reread letters like Clara's, and jot notes in my journal. Meeting next Tuesday, workshop on memoir writing. Mr. Earl will bring his mandolin. Want to coordinate a sing-along. Prepare talk draft for State Aging Conference in September. Each entry felt like a footprint in a regained path. I had been the object of ridicule, and now I was a catalyst for healing. Not by echoing anger, but by offering action. I thought of my son Daniel and his children, of laughing at my phone and the sting it caused. I wondered how many of those letters, how many news clips, and how many stories I would need before they understood. But I also understood that I didn't need their acknowledgement to continue. My legacy was no longer waiting for their approval. It was unfolding in real time with every letter, every sponsorship, every shared meal. A volunteer appeared at my office door one morning, an older man I'd met at a meeting. He handed me a thick envelope. "I couldn't attend last month," he said softly, "but I just mailed this." Inside was another letter, and a check, modest but meaningful. The letter said, "Dear Mrs. Johnson, I am Arthur. My wife left me 5 years ago. I quit talking to my children after some hard years, but since I started coming here, I've made 2 new friends and have volunteers bringing me to family dinners again. You gave me a sense of belonging." Arthur, I folded that letter gently, placed it with Clara's and others in the journal. Then I sat back and looked around the room, the flip phone encased in reverent stillness, the pastel banners that read dignity, connection, hope. The room felt full. I closed my eyes and whispered, "This is legacy, no longer a closed door, but an open heart. No longer just memories of what was, but proof of what could be." They ignored me once. Now I am remembered. And I remember. It was a crisp autumn morning when the live stream began. A simple setup in the living room of my riverside cottage. A camera faced the dining table, where stacks of documents and the flip phone in its glass case sat as solemn witnesses. The link went out to the entire family: Daniel, Rachel, their children, cousins, even distant relations, all tuned in on their widescreens, tablets, and smartphones. I sat calmly at the head of the table, dressed in soft gray linen, the morning sun filtering through the lace curtains like a quiet blessing. I folded my hands in front of me, serene, resolved. The lawyer, Mr. Reed, took a deep breath, cleared his throat, and began reading the will. He spoke slowly, deliberately. "This is the last will and testament of Margaret Johnson." He read through the formalities, the foundation creation, the asset transfers. Then he paused, and the camera zoomed in on his face. Then on the screen behind him, where a simple line appeared in bold: "The sync is complete. Your names are unlinked forever." There was a collective gasp from the online audience. Comments scrolled. "OMG, she did it. So satisfying." Daniel's face turned ashen on camera. He ran a hand through his hair. Rachel's grip tightened on her phone as she watched. I recognized the mix of shock, betrayal, confusion that I had once known well. Daniel's chest heaved, and then he raised his voice, proof impossible to ignore. "Mother, you have millions. How could you do this? You give it all to strangers? We deserve better. This is unjust. How dare you?" Mr. Reed leaned forward and offered a calm smile. "Mr. Johnson, you laughed at her screen in this very house. You mocked her flip phone in front of your children and your relatives. Now your inheritance has been unlinked from her estate. You get a blank one." Online the chat exploded, hundreds of supportive hearts, applause emojis, phrases like "served" and "mic drop." Rachel started to cry, her hiccups echoing in the quiet living room. She looked across the table at me, a young mother with desperate tears. "We need that money. We have bills, the kids' schooling." Mr. Reed placed a calming hand on her folder, and his voice was gentle. "Miss Johnson, your mother needed respect, not cash from those who refused to offer it. The foundation has financial support to operate, and she has provided for her future. But that does not include you." Rachel doubled over in grief. Daniel stared at me. Shock turned to rage, turned to pain. Their children looked on, frozen in the glow of betrayal. Behind me, the glass case glinted. The flip phone nestled inside seemed to hold steady, silent in its purpose. I did not cry. My heart was full. I remembered the lonely letters, the laughter of women rediscovering worth in our foundation. I remembered Rosemary and Clara and Arthur, faces full of fragility and hope. And I remembered that heartache, that instant at my birthday party, when laughter had rung out cruelly and my phone was mocked. They had thought it was a relic. They thought it was worth sneers. And I had thought I might be okay with being a punchline. But I was not okay. Not when that phone meant life-saving calls and sustained connections. Not when it represented love and dignity and memory. Watching Daniel's face crumble, Rachel's sobs erupt, I felt neither triumph nor cruelty. All that remained was quiet fulfillment. They needed tears to understand the gravity of the cost, but I already had all I needed. The foundation chugged forward. The flip phone stood still but powerful, and my soul was still whole. Mr. Reed closed the binders. "This will is legally binding. The Elder Dignity Foundation will receive patrimony, and the beneficiaries listed here will fulfill her wishes of uplifting and dignifying our elders." There was no more sound from their side, just rattled silence. I nodded solemnly, then rose from my seat. I walked to the flip phone exhibit and pressed one dusty button. It chimed softly, the same old melody. The sound filled the room. I faced the camera and offered a small smile. "Remember," I said, voice clear, "legacy is built on kindness and courage, not convenience and mockery." The screen shifted to a second camera showing my face from the front. "You laughed at my phone. I've made sure You have what you deserve. I turned away from the table and toward my office door. The stream ended. I stepped outside into the crisp air, alone but steady. I closed the door behind me and let the quiet wash over me. In the distance, I heard the Mississippi River flow on, as resilient as ever. I would never lose again. Not to laughter, not to mockery, and certainly not to betrayal. They had chosen the path, and I had chosen mine. I survived, and so did my legacy. If you've made it this far, thank you for sitting with me through every silence, every sting, and every step toward something steadier than revenge. Dignity. Because sometimes, what they laugh at is what saves us. This was not just a story about a phone. It was about being underestimated over and over again until the quietest voice in the room rewrote the ending. And if this story stirred something in you, whether it was pain remembered or strength reclaimed, do me one small favor. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, because I still have more to tell. More truths, more reckonings, and more proof that when a woman speaks after years of being dismissed, she does not shout. She simply reminds the world, I was watching, I was remembering, and now, I'm writing the final chapter.